2, 1, 0. All engines running. Small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground.
Hello, I'm John Macker, and welcome to the SANDBOX. We all remember the SANDBOX growing up. It was a safe place to play, and that's what this program is. It's a place, the SANDBOX was a place where life and creativity came alive, your own world, and you had total control over it. Well, this is what this show is about, a safe place to play. Let me introduce our two guests tonight on the SANDBOX. Tonight we have Mark McIntire. He's a professor of philosophy, and I always want to say theology. An expert in theology would be better, since you've had a great deal of experience in that area, and a professor at Santa Barbara City College. Our other guest today is Matthew Bixby, a professor of contemporary philosophy, and also a professor at Santa Barbara City College. Both of you welcome. Today we're literally going to have our own SANDBOX. The metaphor may be for the for the show, but we have literally a real one you can use all during the show here with real sand.
Right.
That we spared no expense.
And real sticks to
Very hard to get real
Absolutely.
sand, by the way. Flown in from Fiji.
Excellent.
And so we'll be using this during the show and the program. Okay, let's get this show going. Our subject today is going to be what you never talk about at the dinner table, religion. Politics and religion, they always say never talk about.
Right.
Well, tonight we're going to tackle one of those taboos, which is religion and spirituality, which kind of go together in some way. We know that virtually all human beings are connected in some way to religion or spirituality in some way in their life. So I want to define those. I'm going to start with you. Tell me what religion and spirituality are today.
Well, first of all, John, I want to thank you for inviting both Matthew and I and to sharing your audience on this topic. It's amazing how we were talking before we went on air that religion is being revived as a topic of conversation, especially in relation to spirituality. Exactly. So your show is very timely, and I'm sure that our students and the community will be very interested in it. The short answer to your question is that religion, in my understanding, is the organizing of spirituality. It's the institutionalizing of a spirituality. One can be a spiritual individual without a religion. But it would be hard for me to think of a religion without a spirituality. That would be a strange religion.
It would.
There may be, I mean, Professor Bixby may disagree with me, as we often do, but my take on it, the initial take is that not all people need religion, but certainly all people need spirituality, something beyond the here and the now, the material, the sensible.
There's 19 major religions. I mean,
Last
there's
time we counted,
280 minor religions, basically. I mean, there's a religion for everything.
Yeah.
You're saying, what about Scientology? Is that a religion without a...
Well, let's distinguish between a religion and a cult.
Yeah.
Let's distinguish between a religion and a movement. There are all these distinctions that Matthew and I work with our students all the time, and that's a very important question. When does a cult become a religion? When does a religion become a cult? When does a religion stop trying to perpetuate itself in being and say, we're done, we don't need this anymore, we can just walk away? When does that happen?
What's your take on that? The religion and spirituality, what's your definition in the 21st century today?
Sure. So, I mean, broadly, I agree with Mark that a lot of the differences come down to how organized a religion is versus spirituality. I tend to think of it as religion is, again, it's an organizational, institutional framework, and it's usually got some sort of a history to it. Religion you can usually trace back to some sort of an originator, someone who started the movement. So you think of like Moses for Judaism, or the Buddha for Buddhism, or of course Jesus for Christianity. These are the figures that all of these members of the religion look to both for guidance in some sense. They're very keen on what these people said and did with their lives and what was written down about them, and for the traditions that kind of grew up around them. So again, if you've got your religion starts here with your central figure, and then through history, maybe it splits up, maybe it goes in lots of different directions. Right. And this probably explains some of the reason why there are, what did you just say, 19 major religions and 280
minor religions?
Yeah. So that probably explains some of that, is that, over the course of, in some cases thousands of years, there's bound to be dispute about what originally happened in the core moment. There's bound to be discussion, which splits people off. And what you have then in spirituality is, we'll just take the present moment here, individuals. You have people that in some cases, like Mark said, are probably also religious, so they have a rich spiritual experience, and they revel in it, and they enjoy it, and it's an integral part of their lives. They can't imagine living without it. And they're part of a religion, because that experience is what informs their sense of wider purpose, a bigger sense to the world, all of those sorts of things. But then you also have individuals who maybe they pay attention to these big figures and these big movements. Maybe they don't. Maybe you have a person who just through personal meditation and reflection has a richer sense of the world just through that. And that's, maybe that's enough for them, or at least they feel as though it's enough, and they don't need, or at least they don't feel they need, a tradition that is informed by these other major movements and ideas. And that I tend to think of as being the big difference. Is spirituality is an individual thing. Religion is a corporate thing. It's a social thing.
Yeah, religion has a lot of dogma, especially your major religions, your big ones. And spirituality, if it were Zen, I think they call it mindfulness. I'm not too sure what that is, but that is that's an individual single thing that you only know for yourself. Right. Where religion, you're right, you share as a group. It's a group meal, a feast that you're going to sit around and eat.
Yeah, well,
together.
John, you've landed on something important, which is the reason why people choose a religion as opposed to choosing a spirituality without a religion or with a religion. There are permutations. And that's one of the reasons why I was excited about doing the show with you and Matthew, was because we can talk about, there are different reasons why religions appeal to certain people, certain psychological types.
Sure.
Certain personality types are more at home in an organized, as you said, traditional dogma setting, and there are other people who are that's entirely inconsistent with their personality. They're just resistant to that sort of thing, especially the dogma part.
But all these religions, speaking of that, all have their own prophets and saints.
Yes.
Okay, everybody has prophets and saints, and they exist in religion as well to the path of spirituality. Okay. But do prophets really speak the word of God? Remember last time we talked about Mel Brooks in the funny movie, History of World War, History of the World Part 1.
Part 1.
And he plays Moses coming down from and he's got the 15 commandments.
Right.
And he trips and he breaks 5 of them.
Right.
He goes, that's okay, we'll just keep 10 of them. We got 10 commandments now.
Right.
So, I mean, this is going to bring us around to a larger question in a moment, but
Sure.
Do prophets really speak for God? I mean, that's really a question. To speak for the word of God.
You're absolutely correct that Matthew brought this out, is that religions seem to emanate from a prophet or from like Abraham allegedly is the source for Islam and for Christianity and for Judaism. It's a monotheism. Not all the religions you were talking about have a monotheism. Some of them are polytheistic. Some don't even have a defined notion of God.
Polytheistic meaning multiple gods.
Multiple gods, many gods. And
So like ancient Roman, ancient Roman gods and things like that.
And some of the Oriental religions having many, many gods.
Yep.
So one of the reasons for God, though, let's talk about for the second. Why do people seem to gravitate to the idea of a God? My view is, and I've been having this ever since I've been teaching 50 years ago, is that religion will survive as long as people are ignorant. And what I mean by this, I don't mean this in a bad sense. Religion will survive as long as we don't know everything about the universe, how it got going, where did it come from.
Right.
Am I wrong about the fact that most religions do try to address the creation scenario and narrative?
Most of them do, and I think one of the not that anyone's ever landed on a good definition of religion. That's the funny thing. If you look at anthropology, no one's ever come up with a definition that anyone's completely happy with.
Right.
But most religions, I would say, do have some sort of a story about how it all got started.
Right.
And
where it's going.
Yeah, and where it's going. And in a lot of cases, where it's all going and where it's going to end up. Mm-hmm. And that is a trait that a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have. And to get back to your question for a second, John, do prophets really speak the word of God? Mm-hmm. To be perfectly honest, I think that's probably a really loaded question because it's going to come down to who you talk to. If you're a believer, then absolutely. Yeah. Like for myself, I'm Christian. So of course I think the prophets spoke the word of God. But if I talked to someone down the street who is a spiritual person or maybe even completely doesn't identify with faith or religion at all, they're going to say, of course they didn't.
But aren't prophets and saints sort of minor gods? I mean, after all, the Catholic Church had 10,000 saints. 10,000. Everybody was a saint in the church, right?
Well, they chopped that down.
I know. They cleaned it out. And what happened to all those guys who made all those saint manufacturers who made medals with saints on it? Right. And your saint,
they're out of business now.
Yeah. You have St. Ralph one day, and one day they say St. Ralph is God.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's just Ralph now. And I don't the medal. So you put a lot of people out of business, but.
Well, there's supposed to be intermediaries.
There's a saint for, are they really not much different than a god? I mean, the way they venerate them?
Well, I can speak to the Catholic tradition because that's how I was raised.
I was going to say, and I think that although there's a lot of confusion on the subject sometimes, especially if you're not Catholic and you're learning about it, the Catholics actually take a pretty strong stance that no, they're not gods.
No, they are not gods. Not even the Blessed Virgin Mary.
But you pray to them and ask them to intercede for you,
right?
Because they have a power and connection you don't.
Right. Right.
So how does that work? Right. I mean, what do you call him? Just a prophet?
Well, that's where the whole concept of what's called grace. Grace comes in. That's grace is the ability to communicate with God through, first of all, good actions, good good works,
right.
Adherence to rules and regulations and dogmas and all that business. Sure. But also, as John just pointed out, in the Catholic tradition, you can pray to a saint.
Right.
You can't pray to a person until they are designated a saint. But after that, you can. And apparently, and this is one of the stumbling blocks I had with Catholicism. I studied for the Catholic priesthood. I left it because this is one of the things. This is one of the dogmas I could not incorporate and preach to other people. The whole idea that God is like up there with an Excel spreadsheet and a laptop and keeping track of the bad things you did today. Huh?
He isn't?
Now, that's one of the reasons why I couldn't do this.
I know.
John. I couldn't do this.
The good and bad, judgment every day.
Grace and sin and redemption and forgiveness.
Okay, so spirituality has their prophets too. I mean, we have in Buddhism, you had the Dalai Lama.
Right.
We had Krishnamurti for the Hindus.
Right.
We
Muhammad.
have Jesus for heaven for the Catholics or Christian. We have in TV Kim Kardashian. I think she's probably now a saint, isn't she? Or somewhere a prophet.
Oh,
she acts like one.
I can't believe that name came up on this show.
I know. I'm sorry. I had to take a cheap shot because I'm a cheap shot guy. I know.
That's where you get the big bucks.
That's where I get the big bucks. So when it comes to spirituality, they essentially have the same things. I mean, they have some prophets who's interpreting, the universe for them.
Sure. And some at a very basic level. They're all trying to offer the people they're talking to some explanation of their relationship to divinity, their relationship to each other, and how that is supposed to work and how that is supposed to look.
And there were good reasons why people turn to religion and spirituality, because science does not explain everything.
Sure. I mean, if we're going to get into that subject right away, science I've always kind of thought of as it's mechanistic. It tells you how a thing goes, but it doesn't tell you why a thing goes.
Right.
And, both explanations are very useful and very necessary.
This is a good set. Okay, we're on a good thing here, science and religion.
Yeah.
They should be partners.
Yes.
Okay, but they're not necessarily. I mean, science and the cosmos, have a huge impact on religion, especially in the last 20 years when we've discovered so many different things out there that we're not the center of the universe for sure.
Oh, right.
The Earth we now know for sure is not flat.
Yep.
But there's been a big drop in the Catholic religion.
Yeah.
And this is a major, or one, if not the major religion, I guess, in the U.S., or certainly one of them, next to Protestants. But so why have all these Catholics no longer, going into the religion? Why are they? You even sent me a little article about the percentage that has dropped over the last 20 years, which is quite sizable.
Right.
Well, and and this brings about the question: are religions becoming, Catholic and Protestant, in their current form, obsolete? Insofar as a hierarchy is concerned, the Pope's concerned, the Church.
It's not just religion, though, John.
Yeah.
All centralized organizations and structures are crumbling. The Democrat Party, the Republican Party, the rise of Trump, the decline of the media, the Vatican is going through all kinds of twists and turns, and it's crumbling. It's all centralized. It's not just religion, and I think that you've hit upon something quite valid, which is that the more we know about the world and our surroundings, the more we're less inclined to trust other prophets and other priests and popes and cardinals and bishops and reverends, and the more we seek the truth of spirituality interiorly.
Sure.
Is that a word? Interiorly? Is that a word?
Internally? Internally.
It is now.
Yeah,
internally.
Well, we'll make it a word. It's a Trump word.
Right.
Exactly.
You can make up words. You can
Alternative
make up
words.
Exactly. Alternative words.
Well, there's a lot of cast of characters and tons of dogma out there in that Christian Catholic religion, and there's been talk about eventually eliminating the Pope and all the archbishops.
I wrote a thesis on that. My
my
doctoral thesis was on that.
Okay.
Against popes and bishops. We don't need them anymore.
No.
So, but I'd like to hear Brother Matthew's take on
Yeah.
on the tension between science and religion.
The tension. Okay.
Yeah.
And there definitely is.
Why do people?
absolutely.
Why do so many of our students, for instance, reject religion because they say, well, they now embrace science, so we don't need religion anymore.
Okay.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, it's probably a lot of things, and being a person that doesn't subscribe to that philosophy, it's a little tough to describe, but I'll go ahead and take a guess.
Empathize.
Yeah, right? I'll empathize. Some of it is just that if you're not raised in a religious household, you don't have a context for any of this. So if you didn't grow up with a religious background, the only way you're going to learn about a religion or a form of spirituality is if someone comes up to you and says, hey, you want to learn about this? And they've got a Bible in their hand, or they've got a Quran they want to show you, or they've got some discussion about the Eightfold Path from Buddhism. Unless someone comes up and teaches it to you, you're just not going to know anything about it.
Right.
And unless you take it upon yourself to learn about it, how are you supposed to internalize any of this stuff? But because we have a curriculum of schools that teach, biology and teach physics, and they should, that's good. People should learn about the world around them. You learn these kinds of things. And while I don't believe that ultimate questions are ever really addressed in science courses, if the only people that are telling you anything about the world are these scientists and these teachers, then you're going to tend to listen to them. And if no one's going up and talking to you about, what Jesus said, or what the Buddha thought, or any of these other religions, it's a shame there's not an even 300. You mentioned it was 280 and 19. We're at 299. It really seems like it should be an even 300. Maybe
Well, we
dig
can
one
use
up.
that number if you like. Again, Trump, we borrow from him. Make it 300.
Exactly. We'll dig another one up.
I want to just, for one moment, ask this question where you're at.
Yeah.
Is science going to be the new religion?
No, I don't think science
Say
will.
that emphatically, almost.
Yeah, I really don't think it
I
will.
disagree.
I don't think it will.
I disagree. When I walked into a classroom 50 years ago to teach my first class,
Yep.
and was it 1966, right?
Yeah.
I could, and I promised Bill I would say this, your producer. I promised, so I'm going to say it.
All right.
And I could reliably predict that the majority, I mean the overwhelming majority of my students had a religion of some kind.
Sure.
Believed in a God.
Right.
At least a creator God.
Right.
At least a God where the purpose of their being, their meaning of their life was dictated by the ideas of this God.
Sure.
I walk into a classroom today to meet a new class of students. I could be overwhelmingly certain of the exact opposite.
Sure.
Most of them are atheists.
Right.
And not only atheists, but they disparage religion.
Sure.
They despise religion. They hate religion. And they equate religious people with stupid people.
Right.
If you believe in a religion, you're stupid. That's a big change in 50 years.
Absolutely, that is a big change in 50 years. But if you're talking about the life that I took your question, John, to be a little bigger than that, bigger than a generation or two.
True, yeah.
That so maybe science is experiencing an uptick right now, and to some extent, it's earned it.
Yeah.
We have a lot to be thankful for, especially here in the first world, for the advantages of technology and the advancement of science.
Right.
And some of the most amazing things that happened in the 20th century were the result of science.
Right.
So, but it's experiencing a cultural uptick I don't necessarily consider to be terribly significant. We're talking about the history
why
of
do you,
human beings.
if you're a scientist, why do you get out of your bed and go to your laboratory and put on your white lab coat and do scientific things? Why do you bother?
Those are philosophical.
Well, science can't answer that question.
Right. No, these are philosophical and theological questions. Right. And that's exactly why I don't think, and because science doesn't directly address them, that's exactly why I don't think it'll ever